Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kuntarkis. My name is Michael, and this episode is The Mysteries of the Olmec Headstones. Welcome, Kuntarkis. Recently, giant headstones were uncovered beneath the soils in New Mexico. Many questions have been asked about the findings because it clearly contradicts much of what we've been taught about the Africans' history as well as past history. Could you give another form of knowledge to who they represent or who made them?
Absolutely, Michael. I just want everyone to understand that it took me a while to formulate a lot of this. And also, I got a lot of bullet points. And what I do with the bullet points in my way, I just add to it spontaneously certain words. So I'll just go with this. Documented human history is only a perception of truth based on physical evidence and supposition. Simply put, an idea of someone else's version of truth built on what has been observed and then summarized, but not necessarily the actual truth. To be truly honest in all facts, one would have to go into the past, that means the human past, of that particular moment in time to see the real reality of what took place. Let's say throughout human evolution, human beings have been driven to explore and even conquer new lands, which included lands populated by other races of humans. The African people, especially the Zulus, were no different to any other race of human beings. They too sought to explore and to conquer new lands through mass murder of that race. That's the Zulus I'm talking about. They were quite an aggressive race. Many thousands of human years ago, a group of African explorers went on a great journey to explore new lands for the future settlement of the African people. The African explorers were called Zulus, who have existed for thousands and thousands of human years. They traveled to what is now called Mexico, which back then was called Maya, and the race of humans were referred to as the Mayans. When the Mayans people first saw the African Zulus, they welcomed them, even allowed them to settle in their new lands. They helped them with food, water, even shelter, even helping to create homes for them, which was quite interesting, actually. I must also add this. It was quite humorous for me to actually look on to the past, where the Zulus didn't want to offend their new helpers because the Mayans are very helpful people. They will come out and they will say, can I help you do this? Or can I help you build this? And the Zulus were very much into, we want to do this by ourselves, our way. And they were sort of very strong-headed. But because the Mayans were giving them that land to settle on, they agreed to allow them to help. So the Zulus also were a very tall race, close to 7 foot tall. Well, while the Mayans were only around 5'8", some even smaller. Yet the Mayans were well known to be the most ferocious warriors in battle. As the Zulus race settled in, there was complete harmony with both cultures living very peacefully. What was more interesting as I went deeper into that past history was a mass conspiracy by the Zulus. Their ultimate plan was to wage war against the Mayan civilization by conquering and enslaving any survivors and claiming Mayan lands for themselves. What was even more interesting was the Mayans were very happy to intermix the two cultures, but the Zulus preferred to keep their race as pure as possible. They did not encourage intermixing, yet they did not discourage any Zulu who, if they chose to, they did not want the Mayans becoming suspicious of the Zulus' intention for being in their lands. What's really amazing is when you go back into the fragments of the past and you put all the pieces together, it shows you the truth in how cultures are so different, and you begin to realize why humanity has had so many unbelievable wars throughout human history. And the end result is based on greed through fears. Nothing has changed right up to this very moment in time. Human life is based on greed, activated by self-inner fears and expressed outwardly through horrendous violence and cruelty. Wow. As we continue with question 1, it was not the Mayans who carved the Olmec headstones. It was the Zulu settlers, at which I will explain a little bit more depth about the actual carvings later on. The Zulus carved the Olmec headstones and they placed them all around the outer perimeter of their buildings as the symbols or to the symbols for their culture and their race, symbolizing greatness, power, which was an attempt to put fear into anyone who came into their city.
Okay, that explains about who the race were and who carved the Olmec headstones, even their purpose. My question is, how many Zulu explorers first came to the Mayan lands?
Well, initially, the exploration consisted of around 30 Zulu men. Now, some were like real explorers, others were real warriors, but they didn't dress up as warriors. They wanted to look peaceful. After great collaboration with the Mayans, some of the Zulus returned back to their own lands. As time passed, the Zulus returned to the Mayan civilization with a further 3,000 Zulus, being mostly men, with some women as well as some children, who settled into the large village that was constructed not only by the original Zulus, but with many of the Mayan men. This is where I became quite interested in formulating the fragments. Now, just before I go on, I just want to explain, because people may not be aware what I mean by fragments. I know we've mentioned it in other episodes, but I think it's important to say it again in this episode so people will understand what fragments truly are. We as people live very physically on this planet. And we're never given the right type of knowledge or the right form of information beyond what we understand in a very physical world. We've been shaped to think and act and do certain things. We don't even realize that this has been the process over many, 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 many years. What we need to learn is to open ourselves up to the possibilities that there are things beyond this earth which is third dimensional in physical matter. There are worlds far beyond ours. There are vibrations, and I call it the fourth dimension, where what is called the nothingness, some call it the void, some call it the emptiness. Within that emptiness, there are fragments, and those fragments represent the past human history from the last 928,000 years. Every thought, every action that was carried out is within all those fragments. And that's where everything goes once you pass from your life. And it's been happening for nearly 1 million years. Within those fragments, I have learned over the last 50 years of myself being on this planet Earth how to function within the fourth dimension, within the realm of spirit. And what I've discovered in the nothingness, through thought consciousness, which takes a lot of development, to literally be able to withdraw certain fragments with your thought consciousness and compile them as they were in that era from the past, like say 1921, 1846, 1611. Whatever it was then, I have learned to formulate, to bring that together so I can see what actually did truthfully take place in human history. And that's the most interesting factor in knowing the truth. And that truth is embedded within every single one of us on this planet, as well as all the trillions of universes that exist out there, and the billions of planets, and the millions of different forms of civilizations. Within us, we have 4 quadrillion cells, and within those cells, there is a thing called the cellular memory. and it holds every thought, every action that you as a single individual has had over the last 928,000 years of human history. And that includes all the incarnations that you have had. So to continue, to help create a clearer picture of the upcoming drama, which by the way is the Zulus' conspiracy plan to attack the Mayan race and take not only the city but the wealth, because they were into gold, very much so, even if it is meant to wipe out the entire Mayan civilization.
So how long did it take the Zulus to complete their plan of attack?
Well, what I'm about to say could be a little confusing to some people because of the time factor. But I'll say that, like, it's interesting when we come to what is time factor. Roughly, it was nearly 250 human years. Several thousand more so-called settlers came across, being the Zulus, every 2 to 3 years, resulting in the Zulus' population growing in the tens of thousands and outnumbering the Mayans 4 to 1. I believe history makes out that the Mayans were a vicious race, but from what I have discovered, they were a friendly civilization in so many ways. The Mayans allowed the mass migration to occur without any form of fear or being any ulterior motive on the part of the Zulus. The Zulus only spent time at nightfall in planning their attack, so the Mayans more than likely would never suspect anything. On the other hand, the Zulus generally believed the Mayans were completely unaware of the conspiracy being planned against them, until some Zulus decided to inform the Mayans, as they did not believe in war, and in secrecy told them of what was being planned.
Now you have me intrigued. What happened after they were informed? What was to take place?
Well, since the Mayans were forearmed with this knowledge, they secretly manufactured more and stored so many more new weapons in order to be prepared for battle when the time came. Even though the Mayans did not want to fight the Zulus because they wanted to have them settle in peacefully and just share the wealth. But because the Mayans were lesser in number than the Zulus, it was vital for their survival in being prepared to successfully fend off any attack upon their city. Meanwhile, the Zulus held secret meetings in planning their attack. Yet little did they know that the Mayans knew the exact day, even the time of attack. The interesting factor about the Mayans, they were strategists, highly experienced warriors due to the number of battles waged and won over their entire history. When the Mayans built their cities and temples, they were mostly built on plateaus, carved out of mountains in order to see their enemy approaching, should any attack take place. On the other hand, the Zulu city was built on the lower lands and were clearly disadvantaged from that perspective.
So, which side attacked first? Was it the Zulus or the Mayans?
With the Mayans armed with the impending attack, they called a secret meeting with their high-ranking warriors, and it was decided 100% that they must attack first and strike hard to weaken their enemy by forcing deep fear within the Zulu warriors. From what I saw, it was a fierce, a ferocious, bloody battle that literally only took less than 4 days. The Zulu city was destroyed, burned completely to the ground level. The Zulus suffered heavily with massive losses of their warriors, in fact, probably close to half. The Zulus were completely shocked by what they thought was a peaceful civilization, being a weak race, easy to conquer, never considered that they would be a formidable warriors. Their oversight cost them thousands and thousands of lives, and those Zulus that survived were forced to return to Africa, no longer welcome on Mayan land. The Zulus that assisted the Mayans were given protection and sanctuary in the Mayon city during the battle and were invited later to remain with the Mayon people after the battle.
So, what happened to all the Olmec headstones?
Well, after the battle and the banishment of the surviving Zulu, the Mayans buried deeply all the Olmec headstones, buried or destroyed anything that represented the Zulu race, effectively wiping out the memory of the Zulus from their existence and their history, as if they had never existed in Mayon land. As I stated at the beginning, most truths from humanity's past to the present moment is only based on one individual's truth. However, when a human being looks within their own inner being and connect through their own mind directly to their soul, they can open up to the complete uncorrupted truth of human evolution from the last 928,000 years. And that most certainly is a journey no human individual would ever forget. And that's the ultimate inner truth of actual human history.
Kuntarkis, did the Zulus ever try to come back to the Mayan lands in that part of history?
That's a good one. No, I did not find any fragments within the nothingness about the Zulus trying to come back. From what I could feel within my own inner self, when the original Zulus returned to their own lands and were told of what happened and how they were defeated quite brutally and in such a short span of time, I believe no Zulus would want to be confronted by such a fierce enemy. The interesting factor about the Zulus, they will fight ferociously, and they have weapons like spears that are much shorter than the normal spear, and they will kill anyone when it comes to war that gets in their way. But if they're ever defeated, they will sort of bend low and forget it ever happened. It's like anyone. You take a bully, right? You take a bully that's really big and they're bullying smaller people. And suddenly a smaller person says, no more. Enough is enough. And the big person goes to grab them or hit them, and the smaller person just whams one massive punch. And the big person just crumbles like a bag of wet potatoes. Well, I tell you one thing, when that person wakes up, if they were knocked out, they'll think twice about attacking a smaller person, knowing how ferocious they were attacked. So you can understand why the Zulus just kept to themselves and probably would never ever talk about it again.
Sure. How were the Olmec headstones shaped? Like, with what technology?
Well, there are a lot of people that believe that the Olmec headstones were carved by the Mayans. Well, they weren't. They were carved by the Zulus. And the interesting factor is I went back again and I discovered some other things. The Zulus have been around for a very long time. And what I discovered was they were visited by an alien race, just like so many civilizations on Earth. It has happened, Michael, right throughout human history. And I'm not just talking about the last 928,000 years. I'm talking of millions of years. And the reason I'm saying millions is the Earth is 4.71 billion years old. So you can imagine that the Earth would have had many different types of life forms. And many aliens came here to naturally mine the resources, but also to control the locals, whatever the locals may have been. And a lot of aliens were left on this planet, going right back then. But the alien race, which I didn't find out a lot, but the alien race that actually came and visited the Zulus literally told the Zulus that they were a supreme race that came from another world originally and were placed here to wipe out all the inferior species, to attack anyone that defied them. And that's what the Zulus were doing. They were attacking other races to take over their lands with supreme authority. But the problem is, when they came up against the Mayans, it was against them and they failed. But they also taught, the aliens also taught them, because they were tall beings, to create statues that would make them look powerful and supreme and put fear into all their, say, people who want to attack them, which they did. And they won many, many, many battles, the Zulus. But those actual Olmec headstones were carved by them with just basic tools. And it took quite a long time. It took like 30 years to shape those ones down on their plateau above the Mayon lands. And that was the interesting factor. And then they dug massive holes right around their massive city, and they put these massive statues in there. Those statues did represent not just the Zulus, it actually represented what they would call their supreme god. Not so much as God, but let's use the word, their supreme god. And they believed in that God. And that so-called alien race, whoever they were, embedded certain types of knowledge. And they used that knowledge to become fierce warriors, to take over other lands.
Many of the headstones wear helmets, some quite elaborate. What is the significance of this headgear and what it may represent about the Zulu culture? There seem to be many different patterns.
Well, I can answer that quite simply, Michael. It's like anything in life. If you look around the entire planet today, there are statues in different countries that represent even alien races. And they look pretty, how would you say, some look pretty evil. I remember watching a series, a documentary called Alien, what was it called? I just can't think of the actual, Ancient Aliens, that's it, Ancient Aliens. And it showed this one set of patterns that were drawn on these walls in statues and that. And if you looked at them honestly, they look quite evil. Now, the funny thing is, from what I've seen about human history, there were a lot of alien races, even over the last 928,000 years, that have come to Earth and have tried to dominate, even put their own religious culture into the locals. And the locals would take it because they saw these things as great supreme beings, not so much called gods, because, God's just an English word, but supreme beings. They saw them greater than themselves. So they followed it. And that was really sad. But the actual Olmec headstones, the carvings were to represent certain types of those alien supreme beings. The ones that don't have any markings on it, or say some form of headgear, is simply just a normal warrior of that alien race. But the ones that had something very fancy, they were more of the supreme being. And that's why they carved those things out. But it was more elaborate than what the carvings were. Because, let's face it, sometimes it's very hard to sort of carve out something perfectly to what your eyes can see.
Yeah, for sure. So you said the Zulus were actually from an alien race. How old was this alien race in evolution?
Okay, you talking about the Zulus themselves, or you're talking about the actual aliens that came here and basically dominated the Zulu race?
I thought that you said that the aliens were the ones that put the Zulus here.
Okay. No, not originally. They're not the ones that originally did that. They're an alien race that came to them after the Zulus were on the earth for thousands of years in their own evolution. But originally, there was an alien race that actually put them here to dominate and take over, say, planet Earth, basically. And they brought over thousands and thousands of them. And they were quite an enormous culture. They had a lot of problems. Many died from wars and all that type of stuff, but they grew over those thousands of years to become a very, how would you say, domineering race. And when they went to war, they went to war. They never gave up. That was the interesting factor. But the alien race that put them here originally, for some unknown reason, Michael, never came back. That was it. There's no more history on them. It's like they just vanished. But this other alien race that came here probably 1800 to 2000 years ago, they were the ones that pushed that they were supreme, and they believed that the Zulus could become also a supreme race to control humanity. They wanted to see the battles. And a lot of alien races back then, they enjoyed that. It's like the ones we talk about, the dark forces. They're simply energy that existed once in their own world, but no longer physical. They actually enjoy putting thoughts into individuals and watching the mayhem that's created from that, even wars. Humans do not realize how much they have been influenced by the dark forces over the last, say, 40,000 years. It's been incredible. People have done things where normally they would not, but they've been pushed because they have a negative nature. But in most situations, they hold back. They don't bring that out. But the dark forces forced it to come out. And that's what created horrendous wars and mayhem throughout human history. These aliens that came here, say, 1800 to 2000 years ago, they taught them so many things. They taught them how to fight, really fight. They helped them with weapons, basic weapons, but still weapons. They even gave them metal that could carve out, horrible type of swords and horrible types of spears and knives. But they also taught them how to carve. And the Zulus end up worshipping these as supreme beings for a long period of time. And that was the sad part. And that's how the Olmec Headstones came about. And there were only basically one lot of these forms of, say, headstones. But the interesting factor is there are more to be found, Michael, in history to come, where the aliens actually placed them in different parts on Earth and eventually will be uncovered, just like so much other information and knowledge is being uncovered.
Wow, cool. So what was the typical lifespan of a Zulu?
Zulus can live anything from 80 to 100 and say 10, 120 years, roughly around about that time. They were an interesting race. They were tall and normally lean, very strong in their body. They did have muscular structure. You could see it, especially the warriors. And even the children, as they were growing up, were taught how to use spears from a very young age. And children even fought in different ways in their wars. Many, many Zulus died in so many battles, but in time to come, they became ferocious when it came to war.
Wow. That's excellent, Kuntarkis. Have you anything else that you might want to add about the Zulus?
Yep. Well, the Zulus were no different, Michael, to any other race on Earth. If you look at the Western lifespan or the Western culture, they've always created wars. They've always created deceit right throughout human history. What people don't fully understand is that when it comes to reincarnation, which is 100% reality, no matter what, anyone that thinks that you're going to be born once, live a life, whatever it may be, whether it's negative or positive or in between, and you die, and you're going to be in the ground for 1,000 years, and some great God's going to come and get you. Their reality is very one-sided and very blind. The reality of reincarnation is created by living consciousness. So every human on this planet, not just other species in other universes, but this world here, it's created so each human can learn lessons of life. So you get born into a family as a little girl, you grow up, you have children yourself, and you seem to stick in a family circle on the wheel of life. But the problem is, as we grow through reincarnation up to the present moment, we also have a very negative energy growing right throughout human history with greed, violence. And that's the sad part. And what we have today is the same thing. Now, the Zulus as they are today is not much of a race. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I wouldn't know. I don't.
Okay. I know this is going to sound horrible, but every dog has their day. It doesn't matter who they are. If you do wrong by others, that wrong will come upon you somewhere in your life, in the present or the future, or your next incarnation. It's the law of the universe. Balance must always be brought back into balance. It's not a judgment. It's what we each create in each of our lives that comes back on us, positive or negative. So the reality of it, we all need to grow consciously and be aware of our past, be aware of others by growing in self-awareness. That's what's important, by growing and becoming a feeling being of the heart. That's how we grow consciously. That's how we evolve. In our present state, our evolution may be growing in technology, but I'll say to you now, most of the technology that's being created at this moment, and the last probably say 50 years, is alien technology. And there are aliens today that are basically controlling humanity, especially people in high places. And that is the honest truth. And we need to take back our power by understanding the past to the present and realize that we are, how would you say, a supreme being. We have the ability to create anything we choose, whether it's positive or negative. But there's a time in everyone's life where we must start to produce a positive energy so we grow consciously from generation to generation.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Kuntarkis, for all that you've shared. If you'd like to find out more about Kuntarkis, he has a website, etcconsciousness.com. We also have a Facebook page, Kuntarkis, facebook.com/Kuntarkis. On the website, there's many things, including you can see about his books. He has several books. And yes, if you'd like to contact us for whatever reason, email kuntarkis@gmail.com. That's it for now. Thanks so much for listening, and stay tuned for more.